Before this video disappears into the shadows, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and lock the door behind you because what you're about to hear isn't just disturbing. It's real. The tray on cell block D. The call came in at 4:17 a.m. A prison nurse, voice shaking, whispered into a recorded emergency line that something was wrong in cell block D of North Ridge Mega Facility. An inmate had collapsed during early chow. Not a fight, not a riot. Just a man face down on concrete, lips stained in a unnatural gray, a food tray tipped beside him like a silent witness. By the time investigators arrived, the body was already cooling. His name was Marcus Hale, 38 years old, serving a life sentence without parole. No known enemies, no history of drug abuse inside, and yet, within minutes of eating breakfast, Marcus Hale was dead. At first, the guards assumed it was another overdose. Mega prisons see them weekly contraband pills, smuggled powders, homemade brews fermented in toilet tanks. But the autopsy would later tell a different story. Marcus Hale hadn't overdosed, he'd been poisoned. And the poison hadn't come from a needle, a pill, or a syringe. It came from the food. North Ridge wasn't just any prison. It was a mega prison, 12,000 inmates, multiple security levels, its own industrial kitchens operating around the clock. Feeding that many men wasn't just a routine, it was an operation bordering on chaos. Tons of bulk rice, pallets of frozen meat, powdered eggs, bread baked by inmate labor under fluorescent lights. The food was bland, repetitive, barely edible by outside standards, but it was controlled. Detective Laura Keene stood in the kitchen an hour later, staring at steel counters scrubbed so clean they almost reflected her face. The smell of boiled starch and disinfectant clung to the air. Workers, mostly inmates in gray uniforms, kept their eyes down as guards lined the walls with hands near their batons. "Walk me through breakfast," Keene said. The kitchen supervisor swallowed. Standard rotation, cornmeal porridge, 2 slices of bread, soy-based protein patty. Same thing we served yesterday, same thing we'll serve tomorrow. Keene nodded slowly. And Marcus Hale got something different. No, the man said quickly, too quickly. Same tray as everyone else. That was the problem. If the poison was in the food, it meant it could have been meant for anyone. Or everyone. The tray Marcus Hale ate from was sealed like the rest. No signs of tampering, no visible residue, no smell. Whatever killed him was subtle, precise, and calculated. Someone inside North Ridge knew exactly what they were doing. As the investigation began, a lockdown was ordered. 12,000 men confined to cells barely big enough to stand in. Tension rose fast. Rumors spread faster. By noon, inmates were refusing to eat. By dusk, guards were on edge, fingers white-knuckled around riot shields, waiting for something to snap. Detective Keene wasn't a stranger to prisons. She'd worked corruption cases, smuggling rings, guard-inmate conspiracies. But this felt different, more surgical, more patient. Marcus Hale, she learned, had once worked in the kitchen. 3 years earlier, he'd been assigned to food prep, cutting vegetables, scrubbing vats, stacking trays. Then, without explanation, he was transferred back to general population. Keene requested his prison file. What she found raised more questions than answers. Marcus Hale had filed multiple complaints before his transfer. Complaints about food quality, about missing ingredients, about something he called the swap. At the time, administrators dismissed him as paranoid. Now he was dead. The prison's internal investigation unit joined the case, along with federal oversight. No one wanted headlines screaming about poisoned food in a mega prison. The public already believed prisons were violent, inhumane places. This would confirm every fear. Late that night, Keene sat across from an inmate informant known only as Redline. He was old-school, white hair, spiderweb tattoos, eyes that missed nothing. "They kill him on purpose?" Keene asked. Redline smirked. "Nobody eats by accident in here." "What does that mean?" "It means food is power," he said. "Out there, you choose what you eat. In here, food chooses you." He leaned closer, voice low. "You ever wonder why some guys stay strong on scraps while others waste away?" Keene didn't answer. "Because not all trays are the same," Redline continued. "Some get protein, some get filler. Some get things that ain't listed on the menu, like poison, like a detective investigating a murder inside a maximum security prison. It sounds like a straightforward case, right? But what if I told you this wasn't just any murder, And this wasn't just any prison. This story starts with a single death but spirals into something far more sinister, a conspiracy that reaches beyond the prison walls and into the very food we eat. Our story begins with Detective Miles Corbin, a man who thought he'd seen it all. He's called to Blackwood Penitentiary, a grim fortress of steel and concrete, to investigate the death of an inmate named Leo. The official report says it was a simple shank-in-a-yard fight, an open-and-shut case. But Corbin has a gut feeling. The guards are too eager to close the file, the warden is too polished, and the other inmates are silent, their eyes filled with a fear that has nothing to do with gang rivalries. Corbin starts digging. He finds a small, coded note clutched in the dead inmate's hand. It's not gang signs or a drug deal. It's a sequence of numbers and a single, cryptic word, harvest. As he questions the inmates, he notices something strange. Many of them are suffering from unusual illnesses, severe fatigue, memory loss, aggressive outbursts. The infirmary is full, but the doctor just shrugs it off as prison life. But Leo, the murdered inmate, was a kitchen worker. And he was healthy, too healthy. Corbin's investigation leads him to the prison kitchen, a place most cops would ignore. He notices the food deliveries are managed by a massive agro-corporation called OmniFood. They have an exclusive, multi-million-dollar contract to supply not just Blackwood, but dozens of prisons across the country. On the surface, it's a model of efficiency. But Corbin discovers something hidden in the shipping manifests, something that connects to the numbers on Leo's note. Certain batches of food supplements are being delivered only to this prison, marked with a special project code, Project Harvest. He pulls a sample of the food and sends it to a trusted friend in a private lab. The results are terrifying. The food is laced with an experimental, untested chemical compound, a neuroagent designed to pacify and control, but with devastating side effects. The prison wasn't just a prison, it was a secret, illegal human testing lab. The inmates weren't just prisoners, they were guinea pigs. OmniFood was using the incarcerated population to rush their new product to market, a product they planned to introduce into the public food supply. Leo had figured it out. He was trying to smuggle the evidence out. The note was his last desperate attempt to expose the truth. He wasn't killed by an inmate over a petty dispute. He was silenced by a prison guard on OmniFood's payroll. The conspiracy goes all the way to the top, involving the warden, corporate executives, and corrupt officials who were paid handsomely to look the other way. Now, Corbin isn't just a detective solving a murder. He is a man with a secret that could bring down one of the most powerful corporations in the world. But he's also a target. OmniFood knows he's getting close. The warden has locked down the prison, trapping Corbin inside with the very people who want him dead. He's cut off, alone, and racing against time. He has to get the evidence out before he becomes the next unfortunate accident at Blackwood Penitentiary. The mystery of one man's death has become a fight for thousands of lives, and the battle is just beginning. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark side, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories you won't find anywhere else. See you in the next video. 3 deaths in 3 weeks, all inside the walls of Blackwood Penitentiary. The official report, natural causes. But I'm Detective Miles Corbin, and I've seen enough to know that nature doesn't work on a schedule. My first visit to Blackwood felt like stepping into a forgotten world. The air was thick with despair, the silence broken only by the clang of steel doors and the distant shouts of inmates. The warden, a man named Thompson, was all smiles and handshakes, assuring me it was just a string of bad luck. Unfortunate, but nothing suspicious. I started with the victim's files. Inmate 734, heart failure. Inmate 219, a sudden stroke. Inmate 508, a severe allergic reaction. On paper, it was clean, but their medical histories showed no prior conditions that would explain such sudden ends. The only thing they had in common was their cell block and the fact that they all ate their last meal in the prison cafeteria. Coincidence? I don't believe in them. My investigation led me to the heart of the prison, the kitchen. It was a chaotic symphony of clattering pans and sizzling oil, run by a skeleton crew of inmates under the watchful eye of the head cook, a grizzled lifer named Gus. He was territorial, his answers short and evasive. He claimed the food was standard issue, nothing special, but the inmates told a different story. They whispered about a special menu for those who could afford it. Steaks, fresh fruit, real coffee, luxuries unheard of in a place like this. Where was this food coming from, and how were inmates paying for it? I started digging into the prison supply chain. The delivery logs were a mess, full of discrepancies. Shipments of high-quality produce and meat were signed for but never seemed to make it to the general population as plates. The delivery driver, a shifty character named Ricky, had a new car and a gambling habit that suddenly wasn't a problem anymore. It was clear he was being paid to look the other way. The pieces started to fit together. Someone was running a black market food ring right under the warden's nose. Gus and his kitchen crew were at the center of it, smuggling in gourmet ingredients and selling them at a premium. But that didn't explain the deaths. Murder wasn't good for business. I went back to the victims. Who were they? They weren't big shots or gang leaders. They were quiet, low-level guys. But then I found it, a common thread in their visitor logs. All three had recently received large deposits into their commissary accounts from the same outside source. This wasn't just about good food, it was a sophisticated money laundering operation. Inmates were receiving dirty money from the outside, then spending it on the black market food. Gus and his crew would then clean the money, taking a cut for their services. The three victims must have figured it out. Maybe they threatened to expose the operation, or maybe they just got greedy and demanded a bigger piece of the pie. Either way, they became a liability. How were they killed? The allergic reaction of inmate 508 was the key. His file said he was deathly allergic to peanuts. I got a warrant to search the kitchen's special inventory. Tucked away in a hidden compartment, I found it, a small jar of concentrated peanut oil. Odorless, tasteless, and deadly to the right person. A few drops in a steak sauce, and it would look just like a natural, tragic accident. For the other two, a cocktail of untraceable toxins, easily mixed into their meals, could simulate a heart attack or stroke. The kitchen wasn't just a restaurant. It was an execution chamber. I confronted Gus with the evidence. He was a tough old con, but when I laid out the whole scheme, the peanut oil, the money trail, he finally broke. He wasn't the mastermind, just a pawn. The real boss was the one person with the power to manipulate the supply logs, control the staff, and ensure no one looked too closely. The one who greeted me with a smile on day one, Warden Thompson. He was the kingpin, using his prison as a personal bank to wash cash for a criminal syndicate on the outside. The deaths were just his way of cleaning house. With Gus's testimony, we brought the whole operation down. Warden Thompson traded his corner office for a cell on death row. The kitchen was shut down, and the black market was dismantled. They say justice is blind, but sometimes, you just have to follow the food. It always leads you to the truth. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. The latest inmate found dead was Jonah Price, a former kitchen worker who'd just been transferred out. Just like Marcus Hale, the bruises on his neck screamed strangulation. Of course, there were no witnesses, no cameras in that perfect blind corner. The message was brutally clear. Someone was cleaning house, tying up every loose end. As the emergency crews finally got the power back on, Keene felt the entire investigation slipping through her fingers. Whoever was pulling the strings knew this prison inside and out. They knew its blind spots, its rhythms, its weaknesses, better than she ever could. That night, she dug into Marcus Hawley's final days. He had tried to get help. He requested meetings, filed grievances, asked to see auditors. But every single request was either denied or stalled. Then, suddenly, he just stopped. 2 days later, he was dead. But one detail jumped out from the records. Hale had a private meeting the night before he died. The visitor logs showed a brief session with the prison chaplain. No notes, no audio, nothing. Keene tracked down the chaplain, a tired-looking man who smelled like old books and stale coffee. He was scared, the chaplain said, his voice barely a whisper. He told me the food wasn't just being stolen. It was being altered. Altered how? Keene pressed, to weaken certain inmates. To keep them dependent, docile. A cold chill ran down Keene's spine. Did he name anyone? The chaplain hesitated, glancing around nervously. He said the whole system ran through one gatekeeper. Someone who could move freely between the staff and the inmates. Did he give you a name? No, the chaplain replied, but he said this person decided who ate well. And who didn't. Back in her makeshift office, Keene stared at the ledger again. The final page caught her eye. The handwriting was different, tighter, more confident. It was a list of initials, And one set repeated over and over again. As Supervisor Klein. Before King could even process it, the alarms blared again. But this time, it wasn't a riot, it was the kitchen. By the time guards got there, the industrial stove was engulfed in flames, the fire licking at the ceiling. Sprinklers kicked in, drenching the room, washing away any footprints, any residue, any shred of evidence. It was arson, deliberate. Firefighters contained the blaze quickly, but the damage was done. The surveillance servers, stored in a back office, were completely destroyed by the heat and water. Someone had anticipated her next move and wiped the board clean. As dawn broke, a sealed envelope was slid under her door by an unseen hand. Inside, she found a single, clean, unused meal tray. Taped beneath it was a note written in stark block letters. "You were looking at the wrong poison." The moment she read it, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an internal extension. Supervisor Klein. His voice was steady, too steady. "Detective," he said, "I think we need to talk. Somewhere private." Before she could answer, the line went dead. Minutes later, an alert flashed across the prison network. Supervisor Klein had signed out for medical leave. According to the gate logs, he had already left the facility. As helicopters began circling overhead and state police were put on alert, Keene finally understood the horrifying truth. The food wasn't just killing inmates, it was feeding a massive system built on control, silence, and fear. And the man who helped run it all was now free, carrying secrets that could bring the entire prison system crashing down. But it was the last line in Marcus Hawley's ledger that haunted her the most. Written beneath the final entry, almost like a whisper from the grave, were the words, "If he runs, it means I was right." And somewhere out there, beyond the razor wire, Supervisor Klein was running. The warden's call was cryptic, just a single name whispered over a crackling line, Blackwood Penitentiary. They said it was the most secure prison in the country, a place where riots were a thing of the past. But something was wrong, deeply wrong. My name is Detective Harding, and this was the start of the strangest case of my career. From the moment I stepped inside, Blackwood felt off. The inmates weren't just subdued, they were listless, their eyes hollow. They shuffled along the corridors like ghosts, with none of the tension you'd expect in a maximum security facility. The guards were relaxed, almost bored. The warden, a man named Supervisor Thorne, greeted me with a slick, practiced smile. He boasted about his revolutionary system, a program he called nutritional compliance. "It's simple, detective," he explained, gesturing to the spotless, almost sterile cafeteria. "Good behavior is rewarded with better food. Bad behavior ... well, they get the bare minimum. It's the most effective rehabilitation tool ever devised." He showed me the menus. For the compliant prisoners, there were hearty stews, fresh bread, even fruit. For the others, it was a gray, tasteless paste he called sustenance slurry. The disparity was jarring. But was it a crime? I wasn't so sure. My gut told me there was more to it. I started my investigation in the kitchens. The head chef was a nervous man who wouldn't meet my eyes. He spoke of secret shipments, ingredients that weren't on any official record, and Thorne's private lab adjacent to the food prep area. No one was allowed in there but Thorne himself. That was my first real lead. My next stop was the infirmary. The prison doctor, a weary woman named Dr. Evans, was initially hesitant to talk. But when I showed her a sample of the sustenance slurry I'd managed to pocket, her professional facade crumbled. She told me inmates on the slurry were showing signs of severe nutritional deficiencies, lethargy, and a strange psychological apathy. They were becoming shells of their former selves. She suspected the slurry wasn't just lacking nutrients, she believed something was being added. "Thorne controls everything," she whispered, handing me a file. "He's not just punishing them with bad food. He's experimenting." The file detailed a sharp increase in psychological breakdowns among a specific group of inmates, the ones who had been on the slurry the longest. Armed with this new information, I know I had to get into Thorne's lab. That night, with Dr. Evans's help disabling a security camera, I picked the lock and slipped inside. The lab was a sterile nightmare of beakers and centrifuges. On a central computer, I found it, Thorne's research. He wasn't just using food to control behavior. He was testing a chemical agent designed to induce docility and suppress free will. The sustenance slurry was his delivery method. The prison wasn't a rehabilitation center, it was a human testing ground. As I was downloading the files, the door clicked open. Thorne stood there, no longer smiling. "I knew you wouldn't be able to leave it alone, Detective," he said, his voice cold as steel. Two large guards flanked him. "This is over, Thorne," I said, holding up the drive. "It's all here. Chemical testing on prisoners." He just laughed. "You think you can walk out of here? In Blackwood, I am the law." The guards moved in, but I wasn't going down without a fight. The lab became a chaotic mess of shattered glass and overturned equipment. I managed to incapacitate one guard, but the other was bigger, stronger. Just as he was about to pin me down, a deafening alarm blared through the prison. The door burst open again, but this time, it was a flood of inmates. At the front was a prisoner I'd spoken to earlier, one who'd been on the verge of giving up. He'd seen me go into the lab and had rallied the others. Thorne's control had finally snapped. The inmates, empowered by a glimmer of hope, swarmed the guards. In the chaos, Thorne made a run for it. I pursued him through the rioting corridors, finally cornering him in the main control room. With his system collapsing around him, the man behind the curtain was just that, a man, cornered and desperate. The evidence was secure, his crimes exposed. Blackwood's dark secret was finally out, proving that true justice can't be manufactured in a lab or served on a plate. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy deep dives into gripping stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. See you in the next one. But Keen couldn't shake Klein's final words. Weeks later, she sat alone in her office, reviewing updated reports. Inmate health had improved. Compliance incidents were down. Violence was reduced, way too reduced. A new data pattern emerged, not in the food, but in commissary access. See, inmates who followed the rules got their credits faster, those who didn't waited weeks. The system had adapted, no poison, just pressure. Keen closed the file and stared out her window. The prison lights glowed in the distance, steady and indifferent. Klein had been wrong about one thing, exposure mattered, but he'd been right about another. Control didn't need chains or cells or even hunger, it just needed incentives. 3 months later, a new report crossed her desk. An inmate at a different mega prison collapsed during dinner. Cause unknown, the meal tray looked normal. Perfectly normal. Keen reached for her coat. Because somewhere, someone had learned the lesson of Northridge, and this time, they were being more careful. If you think this story was intense, you are not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because some systems don't just survive exposure, they evolve.